We'll start off with the first question. Youths nowadays very attached to digital devices and trending lifestyles. How can we advise the youth community for practicing in daily life? Where's that? Oh. Okay. Not only youths. And this is not a joke. I often asked, how can I get my children to meditate every day? And I said, do you meditate every day? And they said, well, how can you persuade your children that it's an important thing if it's not important enough for you to make some time in your life? So being a good example with digital devices. And say that as parents, you may often feel that your children, the youths, don't listen to you. And yeah, that's I think quite true, but they watch you. And you're teaching all the time. When you may not realize it, and you may not be teaching the things that you think you're teaching. Telephones and digital devices. And I've seen parent playing with a child and just having so much fun and so much warmth. It's very beautiful to see. And then the telephone goes or some message, and immediately the parent leaves the child to attend to the message. And that's a teaching for the child, isn't it? I love you, but I love my telephone more than I love you, because when it comes to the crunch, I leave you to one side and see to my messages. So this is an example of how we are teaching all the time by the way we live together. If your mother and father have an argument, and when you get angry, how do you express that anger? How do you resolve that anger? Do you sulk? Do you slam doors? Do you just ask for a few minutes, time out, and then start again? This is how you're teaching children, and this includes whole relationship with digital devices and social media. So we're in a I think a crucial period right now in the light of the Australian government's decision to outlaw social media for the under-16s. And I think the whole world is looking on to see what will come of that. I think from the data I've seen, the detrimental effect of social media on the mental health of the youth, especially girls, is very clear. If you see statistics for suicide, youth suicide, from the early noughties it goes up just gradually, and then 2012 it goes up like that, it almost doubles. And so that's surely not a coincidence that that's when Facebook appeared in our world. It's Facebook, Instagram, all these things. So in one of the points made, someone I would recommend you to read, and maybe some of you are familiar with his work already, the American scholar Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, and he points out that children don't want to have some time out of the shadow of their parents. And in the past 10, 20 years, the paranoia around safety outside the house and pedophiles kidnapping our kids and so on has reached such a level that children are ferried here and ferried there and constantly under their eye of their parents, and leisure activities are are so well organized and overseen that the only time the child can really be free of their parents is on their digital device. And the irony is that the likelihood of a child running into some danger online is literally thousands of times more than the danger of being untended outside the house. So, that's just something to bear in mind. And, I don't want to get into the whole when I was a young man or a young boy, but I will anyway. When I grew up, until I was 10, we lived in a small house on the edge of a forest, and 7, 8 years old, disappear on a Saturday morning, and wouldn't get home until 5 or 6 at night, or go off late summer evenings where it doesn't get dark till 10. Have a quick tea and then off with my friends in the forest. Get back home at 9 or 10. Nobody thought anything about it. It's just what kids do. So it's. I'm not saying we want to go back to that, but it's important to recognize how things have changed and to be mindful of that. Coming finally around to the question itself, the way that I prefer to teach is to use the concept, the Dhamma teaching of Matanyuta, or the right amount, the golden mean. Start off with something which is very easy to recognize: sleep. Ask a child, what is it like if you sleep too much? Have you ever slept too much? How does it feel? I don't feel so good. Like you have a thick-haired, irritable, and so on. And how does it feel when you don't get enough sleep? You're just wandering around, dull, sleepy, and coffee, and wanting some stimulation. So we all know those two extremes of too much sleep and too little sleep, and we have criteria by which we can determine. And we all know what it is just to get just the right amount of sleep. And food, similar. If you eat too much, how does that feel? If you don't get enough to eat, how does that feel? If you eat just the right amount, how does that feel? These are santitika dhammas. These are things that everybody can recognize. And then start to apply that principle to social media. So you're questioning the youth. How much social media do you think is the right amount for you? And what would your decision be made upon? What criteria? And so you might sit, if the youth is interested, just to say, well, from my point of view, there are various things that are important to keep up with in your life, and they like relations with family, maybe visiting grandparents, spending some time at the Dhamma Center, or social life in general, physical health, exercise, so on. The things that the youth would recognize as important to live a balanced life. And so where does social media use fit in with those other needs and those other responsibilities? What would be the right amount? And what would be the wrong amount? Well, I would suggest the wrong amount would be if your social media use means that you're unable to meet those other needs or fulfill those other responsibilities. So my approach is one of encouraging conversation and discussion, and you're developing your relationship with the youth. You're maintaining that sense of connection. You're not living in different worlds. You're listening to their values, and you're not just telling them. You're listening, and you're critiquing if necessary, or at least you're saying, I don't see it like that. You don't just, you just don't understand. When I was your age, I used to think like that, but now I know better, But But you say, yeah, I don't see it like that. This is how I see it. What do you think about that? So this is something that, this can be a really enjoyable part of raising a teen, which generally can be very tough, can't it? But engaging, yes, you have this view, you have this idea. I don't share that idea, and this is why I don't. And what do you say to that? And what do you think about using this principle of the right amount, not too much, not too little, and how do you decide on that? So you can have some really good conversations. So, yeah, so that's one question, and there's a lot more question. Youth don't want to be told. Yeah, we know that, and we were also reminded of that very well just a few minutes ago. And they don't want to be seen as children. They want you to recognize that they've got a mind, they know how to think. And so you say, yeah, okay, this is your chance, show me your thinking on this. So I'm not going to go on to the second question. I'm going to carry on a little bit. Just bear with me, because the thing that's comes up in Thailand now, and probably here is children, youths of Buddhist families coming home usually from international school and saying, "I don't have any religion." This is kind of cool thing now for young people. I don't have any religion, and so how do you deal with that as a parent? Many parents kind of panic and don't know how to respond. But my take on this is explain what you mean by that. What does it mean to have a religion, and what is it that you don't have now that you used to have, and why don't you want that anymore? And you can have some of the best conversations with youths about Dhamma, and we're starting off from where they are. There's a rejection. And you say, well, yes, of course. And you have a right enshrined in the Constitution to reject the religious path, but really like to hear your reasons for it. And often they're not very good reasons. And again, this ties up to this, I think it's a superstitious, sloppy kind of thinking that tells you there is a thing called religion, and you can make statements, religion is like this, and religion is like that, and assume that that statement applies to all religions simply because they're called religions. And it's saying that you can make a statement, sport is like this. And I don't think many people would be able to make a general statement about sport which would cover both chess and water polo. There's so much variation in sport, not quite so much variation, but significant variations in religions, particularly between the family of religions that grew up in the Middle East, which are essentially belief systems, and Buddhism, which is a education system religion. It's a different species of religion. In a belief system religion, I don't have a religion means I don't accept the dogmas of my religion. I cannot believe in those, therefore I don't. That's, I think, a legitimate statement to make. But when you say I'm not a Buddhist anymore, I don't have a religion, what is that exactly is it that you are rejecting or dismissing? And so youth will often just take the sort of the Christian or predominant kind of way of thinking and choose a teaching. Say, I don't believe in rebirth, therefore I'm not a Buddhist. But we're not that kind of religion. It's all right, We're not going to kick you out if you say you don't believe in rebirth, but, let me hear your reasons for it. The essence of Buddha Dhamma is that it is an education which claims that by following the path of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, you can reduce and eventually eliminate suffering, and you can realize more and more happiness and finally ultimate happiness. So there is a way to put that to the test. If you apply the Buddha's teachings, does it reduce suffering? Does it increase happiness and well-being? And if you're saying you reject Buddhism, I don't have a religion anymore, then my understanding would be that you are in effect saying that the Eightfold Path does not reduce suffering and it does not create happiness and contentment. And I would say, on what grounds do you criticize Buddha Dhamma in that respect? And if you are suffering and you lack true happiness in your life, what's your alternative? What do you do that you think is superior to the Eightfold Path? Again, really interesting conversation you can have when your youth comes down and makes these kind of big statements. You know, I'm not going to the temple anymore. I'm not going to the Buddhist. I'm not a Buddhist anymore. I'm someone who has no religion. I'm a free spirit. You know, it's like. So I haven't got on to question 2 yet. Is it okay? One of the things I wanted to share with you is a point that I make with people is, if you ask people about rebirth, and say, I like the mindfulness stuff, and I quite like dana, quite feels good, and sharing things, but this whole rebirth that I can't. I'm a scientific person, or I'm a modern person, or whatever. So, well, why? I just can't imagine it. Heaven realms, hell realms. I just close my eyes. No, not at all. And my reply to this is, you have a lot of faith in the ability of your imagination to decide whether something's true or not. If I'm understanding, you're saying, if you can make a picture of something in your mind, you are ready to agree that it's probably true. But if you cannot make a picture of something in your mind, then you're going to reject it as probably untrue. Is that correct? And why do you consider your imagination, your ability to make pictures of things, as an arbiter of what's real and unreal? Really interesting conversation. Number 3. Okay, I shall go on to question number 2. Okay, in the silver medal position with 8 votes, what would Ajahn suggest to promote community well-being in very diverse Buddhist communities, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, or even within Theravada, Thai, Myanmar, etc.? Well, I did speak about this somewhat this morning, and we are inherently, the essence of Buddha Dhamma, whatever the tradition, is that our core object of faith is the law of karma, and that we are not good or bad or elevated or low because of our birth, our wealth, our name and fame, but because of our actions. And that we take action as our standard. And as I said this morning, this means that we have this phrase, unique phrase, in Dhamma, is like all sentient beings. We're not concerned with only members of our religion or even only human beings. We're certainly, only our group. Buddhism is the universal religion, sabbe satta, all sentient beings. Don't overlook the profundity and the uniqueness of that concept or that truth. So, if we are true to the Dhamma, diversity, where is the problem? But we have our, as I say, our own cultures. And sometimes in our monasteries, Ajahn Chah monasteries in the West, you get like young English monks, let's say, who entered the monastery in England, and they studied. They were anagarikas wearing white, novices to become monks. They're living in England. They have no intention of coming to Thailand. The people who come to the monastery are Sri Lankans and Cambodians and Thais and so many different nationalities apart from English. And their question is, why do we have to do everything like they do it in Thailand? Yeah. We're not in Thailand. We're in a non-Buddhist country. Our Sangha is mostly Caucasian. There's one or two Thai monks. Why do we have to do everything in Thai? And my answer to this is our culture. It's not right or it's wrong. It's not better than the Burmese way or better than the Sri Lankan way. It's our culture. And it's a culture that we have joined and voluntarily. Nobody's forced us to be here. And you make a commitment when you join something to honor its traditions. And we also have this very important teaching in the Majjhima Nikaya where the Buddha talks about the sage and the fool. And the Buddha goes through the various accomplishments of someone on the path, beginning with sila and going on to samadhi and so on. And with each accomplishment, the Buddha says, if on the basis of this accomplishment you raise yourself up and you put others down, you are a fool. If you keep the 5 precepts purely, in the sense you don't break any of the precepts, and yet you consider yourself superior to someone who doesn't keep precepts, by that token, your precepts are, your sila is not pure. It's not just a matter of keeping in terms of not doing this and not doing that, but it's the mental side also. So whenever you, and we all have this tendency, don't we, to want to lift ourselves up by putting others down. And there's also, there is a compliment. Some people like to put themselves down by lifting other people. Oh, he's so wonderful, they're so wonderful, like little old me. And that's a more difficult one to see because it feels like being humble. It feels like you're being virtuous, but it's not. It's conceit. And if you're saying, they're so wonderful, I'm so terrible, that's an aspect of conceit. So if there is prejudice and discord amongst different Buddhist traditions or between different groups within Theravada, we can know from the beginning this is defilement. There's no backing, there's no support for it at all. There are no special cases. We don't have a concept of righteous indignation in Buddhism. Indignation is indignation, whatever rationale you might have for it. And so 8 billion people on the planet, and of those 8 billion, how many of them are trying to live a good life? And of that percentage of the 8 million, how many are trying to do it within some kind of Buddhist framework? They're our team, we we're Team Buddha, and we should help each other out. And the things that make us different, they're not so important. I mean, I have friends and in China, Tibet, Vajrayana, Theravada, Mahayana, and when we get together as monks, the fact that we're all monks together just outweighs everything else. We maybe have different opinions on this text or that text, or sort of that kind of technical thing, and the ways of living our lives as monks. But the sense of being brothers and being all on the Buddhist path is so much stronger than that. And I hope you see that with the Sangha members in WACANA and in other meetings that you attend. So don't get into that us and them. And in Buddhism we don't tend to go in for out and out aggression, but there's like sublimated aggression. And sublimated aggression, I mean, Buddhists will often make kind of little jokes, and humor can be a liberating thing, and humor can also be a vehicle for aversion. It's just a joke, don't take it seriously. Have a sense of humor, but being very mindful of your intention in making fun or just gently teasing or joking. There's often some real dosa behind that. And also, you should always question yourself whenever you're talking about someone behind their back, and that includes organizations. Why? For what purpose? And that should really, most times, you don't really need to say that. Let's say there's a scandal in another group, and the leader or one of the leaders been involved in something or other, and this in Thailand this year, it's just been so many scandals, and then, you have this itch, you want to tell somebody else about it. Why? What for? What purpose would it serve? And so this is part of mindfulness practice, not just whether your words are true, but they're useful and supportive. And if it's just to poke fun at, or to point, just to exercise and rehearse all the things that are wrong with other people, then you say, well, is that the path that you want to follow? Is that the kind of person that you want to be? So if we're all on this, we're on the good team, okay? Where my analogy, again, is sports analogy, football, So when you watch, I used to watch football when I was a boy. I used to like to play football. Like, what happens when the centre forward scores a goal? You don't see the goalkeeper and the centre back saying, it's always him, never me. They're always cheering him and singing his name, It's not fair. No, they run as fast as they can and they jump on his back and they hug him, because it's not him scoring a goal, it's his team. His team's got a goal. And so when you see other groups, maybe some things about them you don't like so much, you don't appreciate so much, it's not your style, that's okay. But they're our team, and we and support each other and appreciate that diversity. And I think, like any tradition, if you're and this is how I teach monks in Nanashat, first 5 years, stick to Theravada texts. It's a language. You have to be fluent in the language of Theravada. You have to be able to see things in terms of the 4 elements, the 5 khandhas, and understand and really be completely have the eightfold path, and all these things, these concepts, these pariyatti terms, need to be at your fingertips. And then, after that, you may look at some Mahayana texts or Tibetan texts, and then you can take what's valuable from them and add on to your own practice, because you are confident enough and knowledgeable enough about your own tradition that you can see things that are using a different idiom, but are compatible with your training and can enrich it. Other things, that's not something I can use in my tradition. But obviously there are some very wise and compassionate people who've followed in that path and made great progress in Dhamma through it. So mutual respect, mutual admiration, this is something that should come naturally for anyone with right view and love of Dhamma. As a university student overseas, I had plans to start a Buddhist club within my university, but have various doubts and fears about my ability to convey the Dhamma. Any advice and encouragement? An obvious point, but if we were to restrict Dhamma teaching to Arahants, then Buddhism probably would have disappeared from the world like 2,000 years ago. It's more a question of being honest and sincere and not making yourself the proof of the pudding. Not I'm the Ajahn and feeling that you're the teacher and that you have to be seen in a certain way and you have to, it becomes like too performative. It becomes like a drama and not good for you. But if you are sharing things you've learnt with others, you've put the time and the effort into studying this and trying to practice it, and you've had successes and failures and a sense of what's difficult and what's difficult, and you want to share that with others, then that's a wonderful thing. And, if you're walking through the darkness or through you don't have to reach the end of the path and like shine a light down from the top of the mountain for someone to follow. You can only be 2 or 3 steps ahead with a flashlight, and you can help people along that path. So it's stressful, if you're taking a leadership role and your own practice is still very new. You're going to meet all the worldly dhammas of praise and blame and so on and so forth, and people liking you and disliking you, and people coming and people disappearing, and people, if you're willing to take that on, just be very, very real to people. I'm just a student. And when people ask you questions about things which are outside your realm of experience, don't ever pretend, obviously. Don't try to be something you're not. But say, well, Ajahn Chah says this, or Paok Sayadaw says that, or Dalai Lama says this, or in the sutta it says that. So you're finding the best answers you can, but you're not saying or even giving the impression by default that this is coming from your own experience. You're very scrupulous. When you're talking about things outside your practice, make it very clear that you are passing on, you are a messenger, you are transmitting as best you can, translating into everyday words things that you've heard and you've studied and that helped you and you hope will help them. So it's a learning, and I think anyone who's been in any kind of teaching role will know that teaching is one of the best ways of learning, because we absorb a lot of information, and whether it's academic knowledge or spiritual knowledge, and we often overestimate the extent to which we've absorbed that information. And we can develop really serious blind spots, and the best way to prevent that happening is teaching it to somebody else or sharing it with somebody else, because you just stop, you suddenly realize you can't explain this, and it's not really clear in your mind. And it's only when you have to try and help somebody else understand it that becomes very clear. So it is a very good way of learning the Dhamma, as I say, with that proviso that you're very honest and sincere and real about, what you're, what does the Buddha say about mental agitation, how to overcome mental agitation? He said, well, I suffer from this myself, but this is something I've tried, and this is a teaching, and it works. For me, some of the time, I'm a work in progress, but this has seemed most helpful for me. Okay. Ajahn, how can we serve our community better, as sometimes we have backbiting and gossiping about other workers or committees in the duty after? Don't do that. Just stop. As you're about to open your mouth, just go. It's as easy as that. Just close your mouth. You're about to say something. Stop. And if other people are gossiping, you don't want to give them a Dhamma talk and saying, you don't do that. But you just don't participate. You just quietly walk away. And people notice. And then they realize, that's your teaching. Not joining in is the way that you help other people to become more mindful of that. If when there are regular meetings where you're sharing, how things are going these days, then you can bring up this sense of discomfort when people are gossiping behind other people's backs and running them down, and how it makes you feel sometimes you don't want to come anymore, and you think, I'm volunteering for a Buddhist organization, and yet when I come here I hear the same kind of backbiting and that I hear in my office, and I'm thinking, why come here at all? And that's quite powerful, because people who, mostly I think people who gossip in Buddhist centers, it's not often really malicious, it's just a habit that people get in. It's a way of relaxing with friends. Yeah. So, but it's not a good way to relax with friends. There's a better way. So trying to reduce that and eliminate that, and it just undermines the trust and the warmth and all the things that should make Buddhist communities ones which you look forward, you're volunteering, you're actually looking forward to getting there. You're looking forward to the volunteering. You walk away and you're kind of tired, but it's a good kind of tiredness. I was thinking, in this kind of event, usually you sort of give thanks to the tireless workers who made this possible, and I think, no, I'd like to appreciate all the tired workers who make this possible, because something like this is really tiring work, as you probably know. But there's good tiredness and bad tiredness, isn't there? So if you're going to a community and you put a lot of effort, time and effort into it, and at the very least that you should get back. And it's okay. You're not doing it for this, but this sense of shared effort in something which is good and wholesome and kind, and how easily that is undermined by just a few minutes of gossip and nasty criticism. So, yeah, please stop, don't do it. I noticed that desire for material things, money and relationships never truly brings lasting satisfaction. From a Buddhist perspective, how should I understand this and how should I practice? I think that first sentence is not the kind of knockout argument, that sort of slam dunk argument that many people think it is. Even somebody who's really into worldly pleasures, and you say, this is not going to give you like truly lasting satisfaction. They say, I just want half an hour, or an hour, I don't have that kind of expectation. And many people say, well, yeah, if there are a number of sensual pleasures, then I could have like a short, impermanent pleasure with this one, followed by a short, unpleasant pleasure with that one, and I could have a stream of short, impermanent pleasures, and it would feel kind of like a permanent pleasure. So the sensual mind, and has many ways of looking at this. We're not Puritans here, and you're saying, well, I enjoy it, therefore it's evil. But what we're saying is, look at the experience closely, and I think the trap or the mistake we make is in our perceptions and our memories of sensual pleasure, we tend to focus on the peak experience, the peak pleasure. And one way to counter that is to follow a pleasure right from the moment of the arising of desire in the mind. And desire is suffering, isn't it? I mean, because what do you do as soon as you get the desire? You want to get rid of it. You don't want just to experience desire in your... Desires leads to its cessation, but not in the Dhamma sense necessary, by slating that desire. But if we see that the actual peak pleasure from many sensual desires is in large part the liberation from all the stress and tension of striving for it. So you say, how much is the actual experience itself? And how much is letting go of all the stress and strain of trying to get that, afraid someone else will get it instead of you, afraid it won't be what you want, and etc., etc. And then notice how sensual pleasures fall into this, the law of diminishing returns, that a sensual pleasure which may give you a lot of pleasure the first time you experience it, after a few times it's not the same. And then you have to increase either the intensity or make it a little bit different, a little stranger. You can't be content, even to maintain the same level of contentment that you first had. There is a decline. And that can easily lead to indifference and then looking for something else. And you have to really go into this and finally to all the fears about losing something and then the separation from something, and to see sensual pleasure, the whole process, the whole movement from the first kind of arrow of desire right to the separation. Before that sense of nibbida and weariness will really start to manifest. But together with that, the development of samadhi is crucial in that it will give you access to non-sensual pleasure. And for the first time, you have a perspective. So if you see look at destructive sensual pleasures. Why is it you can find many doctors who smoke? This is not an IQ problem, is it? I mean, and many destructive addictions, we can see people who are addicted in this way are often very well educated, intelligent people. So it's not that they don't know that this happiness is not going to satisfy them and can have a very negative effect on their physical health, on their relationships, on their family, and so on. It's not that they don't know that, but why is it that they can't let go of it? And my analysis is that deep inside you think, yeah, this is a pretty inadequate and unsatisfactory pleasure, but it's better than no pleasure at all. Okay, that's the hook, the fear of no pleasure. And you can't it's very difficult to overcome that intellectually. And the way that you can overcome it is through samadhi and realizing, simply by letting go of defilements in the heart and cultivating mindfulness until it becomes a stable stream of mindfulness and the mind changes and becomes stable and firm and clear and bright and happy. This is something that lies within you and that you can realize. It's not just like a fairy tale to, that money's not, the end of the highest value and so on. We pay lip service to all these things. True happiness lies within. But even if you accept that as an idea, very few people live their lives based upon that principle unless you've developed samadhi and you know it for a fact that it's true. So once you have that that knowledge and that contentment there, now when you have the option to indulge in sensual pleasures, there's not that neurotic pull towards the sensual pleasure, that fear of missing out, fear of emptiness, fear of nothingness, because you know that it's not essential to your well-being. So sometimes, people can be a little, samatha, that's not really, vipassana, and that's where, that kind of debate that goes on sometimes. And we even can sort of argue about things like samatha and vipassana. But the point is that it's an emotional maturity that helps you to be free of sensual desires and obsessive sensual desires and destructive sensual desires. That emotional maturity is most likely to appear in your mind through developing samadhi and having access to non-sensual pleasure. I teach teenagers mindfulness meditation. I like to help my students establish skillful intention before we meditate. Can you advise on a suitable intention we can regularly use before we practice? I think it's more a matter of discussing what's mindfulness for. Is mindfulness just for relaxation, stress relief, being able to enjoy eating an orange more than you would with a distracted mind? Is it to enhance your life and your career? Is it a matter of just being present to whatever, right? What is mindfulness? Why practice mindfulness? And for me, I'm not sure I have any kind of affirmations or anything like that, but really seeing why it's valuable, why you should aspire to it, why you should be willing to make sacrifices in order to cultivate it. In other words, you want to be thinking, reflecting in ways that give rise to chanda, Dhamma chanda. So motivation in Buddha Dhamma divided into wholesome motivation, unwholesome motivation. Wholesome desire, unwholesome desire, unwholesome motivation we call tanha, and wholesome motivation we call chanda, which in fact is short for, it's an abbreviated form of Dhamma chanda, because chanda itself is a neutral mental factor. But at least in Thailand, we tend to use chanda as abbreviated form of Dhamma chanda. So the question is, how do we create the right intention and how do we protect that right or wholesome intention? Because often wholesome and unwholesome intentions alternate, and one can slip into the other. You can start off with an unwholesome intention and it can become wholesome, and vice versa. So in a meditation session, want to bring some. This is one example using the triple gem. Let's say an enlightened teacher, like Ajahn Chah. For I'll take my teacher, Ajahn Chah. And if you have some memories of him, you've seen photographs of him, or you've seen a short video clip of him on YouTube, or you've read things about him, and you just think of Ajahn Chah, or you think of a teacher who you look up to, and your mind just, you just feel this surge of energy, and then you reflect that he started off, or she started off, just where I am. And he realized what he realized through practicing the Dhamma. There is a path which he followed, which I can follow, which I am following right now. So that's energizing, and that will bring up that, give you a framework for practice and an inspiration for practice. The other, not just for youths again, but for everyone, the idea of bhati puja, the idea of we pay homage to the Buddha through our practice. And one of the sticking points in Dhamma practice for many people, and why it's not really consistent, is that too often it becomes like a personal project, my journey, my whatever. And if it's, your project, your journey, your awakening and so on, then sometimes, you wake up in the morning and shall I continue my journey on the path to enlightenment, and you think, no, right now I'd prefer for another half hour skip, and I was up late last night. So if it's for you and for yourself, it's hard to find any consistency. But if you are looking at meditation, particularly in the times when you don't want to meditate, so it's all right when you're already inspired, but when you don't want to meditate, then saying, this is my puja. I'm going to offer this 15 minutes or this 30 minutes out of gratitude to Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, out of gratitude to my teachers. And you suddenly, it's not for you, it's being something that you're giving. If you're thinking, what can I get from my meditation today? Oh, I don't know, I was up late last night and I think I'm not sure I'll be able to get anything from my meditation. But if you change it, say, well, what can you give? Can you give anything? Can you give some effort to, as a homage to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha? Yeah, I probably can give something, maybe not so much, but more than nothing. And that can, and another way of motivating yourself is, I'm going to meditate for first 5 minutes, and I'm going to dedicate the merit to my mum, or to second 3 minutes or 5 minutes to my dad. And then you have a list of people that you want to share merit with and express. And that's motivating. It's not just you anymore. It has a reach, it has a significance outside of your own world and your own spiritual project. So that's some examples. In Bhante, at times the Sangha community seems to be critical to each other, especially with reference to meditation practice. This is confusing, creates disharmony. So I shall raise my hands in respectful greeting to Sangha members everywhere. Please don't do that. Venerables. It's confusing and creates disharmony. And so you go and you pay respects, humble respects to the bhikkhus and the nuns involved, and you tell them, I'm sorry, but when I hear you speaking disparagingly about other practices, other groups, it really makes me uncomfortable, and I find it very distressing. And I just want you to know that, it's just as to give you that information. You may have good reasons, I don't know, but I want you to know how this sounds to the lay supporters. And that's the way that you can give very useful feedback, not criticizing the monks or nuns in turn, but you're letting them know, you're giving them the feedback that when you hear this, it makes you feel really sad and unhappy that should be the case. How can Malaysian Buddhists unite all representation organizations, namely TBC, MYBA, MMBA, etc., to be more united and effective voice in our government? I think that the evolution of the Buddhist community in Malaysia, particularly Theravadan Buddhist organizations, such that it is something to consider, having I don't know, excuse me if you have this already, but a spokesperson who can be a resource person for media organizations, so that when there are issues of national cultural significance, then news organizations can say, what is the Buddhist community's response to this? And it raises the level of popular awareness, and can also be a way of injecting a little bit of Buddhist wisdom and compassion into mainstream of society, and having a voice in local government or on national government, not playing politics, but simply, being able to express your democratic rights and wishes and needs in a non-aggressive, polite, respectful way, and as I say, mediated by an umbrella organization. That this is something that's not unusual in other countries, even in Western countries. So if you have, I'm very ignorant about most of what goes on, so you have to forgive me if you've already something like this in place. But that's what comes to mind reading this question. As a Buddhist, whenever I have a question on Buddhism, be it seeking knowledge or seeking advice, I find it convenient to get it from AI. I think this trend is getting traction. Yes, I think you're right. I use AI. I'm a fan. And the one that I use the most, and most of you will know this, is called Notebook LM, and I like this one because it only draws upon information that you put into it. So you're not getting like hallucinations, and so you can. I have like a notebook in Notebook LM, which a monk in Europe put together with 43 different Vinaya texts, and so I can ask a question and immediate answer, drawing upon all those texts which I have looked through, and I'm satisfied at the quality of the scholarship and so on. And you can make. I have another notebook which has the Visuddhi Magga and the Vimutti Magga, and you know, Visuddhi Magga is like that thick. I have to confess I don't open the Visuddhi Magga very often, but I sometimes say, what does the Visuddhi Magga say about this or that? So as a scholar, I'm not really a scholar, but sort of semi-scholar. I really appreciate it. So, you know, AI is a kind of a wide, you know, covers a wide number of things, but there are certain aspects of AI that can streamline, be like a research assistant, and with care and restraint and so on. I think it's actually a benefit to Buddhist scholars or semi-scholars like me. Okay. We are prone to prioritize many other activities such as work, traveling, having fun, instead of giving our time to do service or meditate. How can we create a sense of urgency to prioritize? Well, first of all, you know, we do have to relax and enjoy things. I was speaking to a couple of occasions to some of the smaller groups, talking about activities for youth, or activities. It doesn't all have to be mindful this and mindful that, you know. It's like kind of straitjacket, you know. You can, I have an idea of like Dana Cafe, okay? So this is a coffee shop where everything's free, okay? And you can go, it's a Buddhist free coffee shop, okay? And you have volunteers who are working there and taking shifts, and then young people or middle-aged people, if you like, just go and hang out there, and you can have some conversation or do some work on your computer. It's just like a safe, friendly Buddhist environment to hang out in. And you can have like a donation box, like a monastery, and people who come and hang out and drink coffee can put some money. Nobody cares how much money you put in, whether you put in 1 ringgit or 100 ringgit or whatever, or nothing at all. It's all right. And I'm sure there will be generous Buddhists who want to support that and make some donation towards it, and have this kind of option where you're not having to, look to non-Buddhist activities, but it shouldn't be like this stark kind of contrast between going out and having a good time and going to a movie or being a volunteer. It's just too black and white. There should be something in the middle, which is you're working hard. You need a bit of relaxation, just and it doesn't have to be so kind of virtuous. All the strange thing for a Buddhist monk, isn't it, to say that, but I hope you understand what I'm saying, and I wonder if anybody would be inspired just to try this out, like a Dana cafe, Dana coffee shop, and see what would come of it. The other thing is, again, observation, simply. I mean, this is key to all Dhamma practice. Observe what really does make you happy. What does make you unhappy? Not what you think or what you're told or what the society or the culture tells you. And often you find like sweeping, cleaning. This is what monks do for recreation. Sweep and it's like if it was a worldly job. You say, oh, what a kind of low. But that's the job that arahants love, like sweeping leaves. It's not like working on stocks and shares and things like that. But observing, when I do something like this with mindfulness, with attention, I enjoy it, irrespective of. So it's not like being a volunteer or doing this, but it's just that quality of mind. You bring that quality of mind to whatever you're doing, and immediately you just feel that it feels good, and it's all right if it feels good. One of the things that I teach monks, you have to enjoy monastic life. If you don't, you won't last. And the monks who hang around till they're old men like me, like 50, 60 years, because they love being a monk. You really enjoy it, and being smart enough to really appreciate what you're doing, and to cultivate that wholesome sense of pride, not talking arrogant pride, but that sense of, that's a good thing, and it feels good to do good things. That's a sort of foundation. It's not the sort of very profound, liberating happiness, but you need to go step by step. And that's how we prioritize these things. What kinds of activities are you able to apply yourself in a mindful way and feel proud of yourself afterwards? And then the more trivial and pointless things, they just fall away by themselves. How would we balance ourselves when we have to deal with a lot of worldly expectations of others on us, the responsibility and limitation within ourselves? I have a confession here. I'm a little bit not fed up with, but I'm a little bit wary about questions that begin with how do I balance X and Y. So many questions that begin with this phrase, I was saying, don't make that your default, because, example, someone will say, I really like to drink beer. How can I balance that with keeping the 5 precepts? You can't. So, as I have 5 minutes remaining. Okay. There's some things you can't balance. So before asking a balanced question, is this really something that needs to be balanced? Okay. Or is it just one of those 2 things should be abandoned altogether? So how do you deal with a lot of worldly expectation? That's always going to be there, isn't it? expectations of parents, expectations of people who love you, and so on. But that's just the environment, you know. It's just the way the world is, and be at peace with it. You can't say people should not have expectations of you. I mean, that's their privilege if they want. But you can give feedback and tell people that I feel this pressure of expectation on me, and sometimes it's so strong that I feel I'm not really able to express myself. And often with parents particularly, they're stunned. You know, they think that their expectations and that's them showing their love for you and their care and their concern for your future. And sometimes you have to communicate that's not what's most helpful for me. And but living in a world where there's no pressure and there's no expectation, that world is not one that can be found. So, you know, you're not constrained by that. It's a consideration. People's expectations are something to be taken into consideration. But it's when you're thinking about it and you have this vibhava tanha and you don't want to have people looking at you and expecting things from you and you're afraid you're going to disappoint them, and then that fear of disappointing somebody becomes resentment against them for making you feel this way, and you get caught up in all this. You say, yeah, this is part of the world I live in. You know, I have parents who care for me and worried about my future, and I have teachers and so on, and it's better than nobody cares what you do in life, isn't it? I mean, that wouldn't be so great either. Yeah, go ahead, do whatever you want to do. It's your life. That wouldn't be very nice. So, yeah, it's all right. It's a consideration. How many minutes? Is there a number? 3 minutes. Okay. I apologize for all the people that I'm not going to be able to answer. What you can do is, and I'm serious about this, you get your question and you open ChatGPT and you say, I wanted to ask Ajahn Jayasaro this question. What would his answer have been? Somebody in China did this and they sent me the answer. Wow. Yeah. It's quite reliable. No. Dear Ajahn, how do I know when to hang on and when to let go? Oh, that's too difficult. I'll go on to the next one. This is a bit better. Ajahn, is it okay to decline a task within a Buddhist organization? Yes, of course it is. But look at your reasons for declining. Are they good reasons, reasonable reasons, or is it some defilement? If it's some defilement, is it better maybe just to go against the grain a little bit and do it anyway and see what happens? Or if it's really sure this is just really not something you can handle right now, okay, why not? Okay, last one. Ajahn, when come to practicing daily chanting and meditation, always come out with the reasons. Example, busy with a daily routine, tired, and so on. Can Ajahn give advice, guidance for a kickstart? Yes. Mum or dad. Turn your back on them, look over your shoulder and say, as hard as you like, go ahead. And they'll give you a kickstart. Otherwise, just do it. Anything that you have some real resistance to, trick, skillful means is do it for 3 minutes. Make a determination. Okay, I can't chant for half an hour. I can't meditate for half an hour. All right, don't. 3 minutes. That's all. And of course, it's usually once you just get over that hump of the first 3 minutes, then often you say, well, yeah, I'm here now, I might as well carry on. But if you stop at 3 minutes, it's all right, better than nothing. But keep continuity is the important thing. You know, you're not sort of going all out, gung-ho, and then stopping and then starting and stopping. Keep that continuity of practice, even if it's just a few minutes. That's really helpful to you.